Hi, my name is Swetha Thiru, and today I'm going to be teaching you on how to solve quadratic equations in different methods. First, let's talk about what a quadratic equation is. A quadratic equation is a polynomial equation of the second degree that represents a parabola. It should contain at least one term that is squared. The standard form of a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. That is when a, b, and c are constants or numerical coefficients, and x is an unknown variable. One absolute rule for the quadratic equation is that the first constant a cannot be 0. Let's talk about the vertex form of a quadratic equation. The vertex form of a quadratic equation is y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. In this equation, a, h, and k are constants, and x is the unknown variable. hk is the vertex of the parabola. X is equal to h is the axis of symmetry. H represents a horizontal translation, which is how far left or how far right the graph has shifted from when x is equal to 0. And k represents a vertical translation, which is how far up or how far down the graph has shifted from when y is equal to 0. A represents the stretch, compression, and reflection factor of the parabola. To solve a quadratic equation, it can be solved in any one of these following three methods. It can be solved by quadratic formula method, by the factoring method, and by completing the square method. To solve the quadratic equation, I'm going to be showing you sample quadratic equation that I've chosen, which is x squared plus 7x plus 6 is equal to 0. This is written in standard form, as I said before. Standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. The same equation is written in vertex form, which is y is equal to x plus 3.5 squared minus 6.25. In this equation, we can see that negative 3.5, negative 6.25 is the vertex of the quadratic equation. This is the table of values for this sample equation, and it shows the x and y points and the different ordered pairs to plot this parabola. In this table, we can see that when the x value is plugged into the equation to represent x, it gives the y value. An example right now is negative 7 can be x, and when we plug in negative 7 for the x value, it would become negative 7 squared plus 7 times negative 7 plus 6 is equal to 0, which would create 49 minus 49 plus 6 is equal to 0. This would equal 6. From this table, we can see that that is correct. This is the graph for the sample quadratic equation, and from this graph, we can see that there are two x-intercepts, which is negative 6, 0, negative 1, 0. And we can also see that there's a y-intercept, which is 0, 6. We can also see that there's a vertex of this equation, which is negative 3.5 and negative 6.25, as I said before from looking at the vertex form of this equation. Now let's solve this quadratic equation by first using the quadratic formula method. The formula for the quadratic formula is x1 or x2 is equal to negative b plus or minus root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. In our sample equation, a is equal to 1, b is equal to 7, and c is equal to 6. By substituting these values in the formula, we get x1 or x2 is equal to negative 7 plus or minus root of 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times 6 over 2 times 1. When we simplify, we get negative 7 plus or minus root of 49 minus 24 divided by 2. When we simplify this, we get negative 7 plus or minus 5 divided by 2, and we get the two solutions, negative 6 and negative 1. Therefore, the zeros of the sample quadratic equation, x squared plus 7x plus 6 is equal to 0, are negative 6 and 0. Negative 6, 0 and negative 1, 0. To verify the solutions that we found from using the quadratic formula, we can plug in the x values that we got and substitute them for the x values in the equation. So when we substitute negative 6, we get negative 6 squared plus 7 times negative 6 plus 6, which gets us 36 minus 42 plus 6, which gets us 0. Therefore, negative 6, 0 is one of the solutions for this quadratic equation. Now let's verify our second solution. Negative 1 was the x of that solution, so let's plug in negative 1 into this equation. Negative 1 squared plus 7 times negative 1 plus 6. And it ends up to be 0. This agrees with our solution, and so therefore our two solutions for this quadratic equation is negative 1, 0 and negative 6, 0. To find the y-intercept of this sample equation, we could substitute 0 as x into the formula, and we would get 0 squared plus 7 times 0 plus 6, which would equal 0. Therefore, 0, 6 is the y-intercept of the quadratic equation, which is x squared plus 7x plus 6 is equal to 0. Now let's use the factoring method to solve our sample quadratic equation. In this method, we need to group the left-hand side of this equation as a multiple of two factors by numbers that satisfy the following format of the equation. Let's do x squared plus addition of two numbers x plus product of the same two numbers is equal to 0 is the format. In our example, we need to find the two numbers that satisfy the following. The sum of two numbers should be 7, and the product of those two numbers should also be 6. The two numbers that satisfy these two conditions that I found for the sample equation are 6 and 1. Now our sample equation can be written as x squared plus 6x plus 1x plus 6 times 1 is equal to 0. This simplifies to x times x plus 6 plus x times plus 6 is equal to 0. Taking the x plus 6 as a common factor, the equation will become x plus 6 times x plus 1. So the zeros of this equation would be negative 1, 0 and negative 6, 0. To verify the solutions that I found, again, I would do the same process as I did before to verify, which is I would plug in the negative 6 as the x into the equation, and as a solution I would get 0, so since this agrees with my solution, I would get negative 6, 0 as one of the solutions. For the next solution, I would do the same thing and plug in the x value that I got, which was negative 1, into the equation, and I would get 0 in the end, which means that negative 1, 0 and negative 6, 0 are the zeros of this quadratic equation. Now, let's find the y-intercept of this given equation just like we did before, and plug in the x as 0 into the equation, which would become 0 squared plus 7 times 0 plus 6, which would get us 6. Therefore, 0, 6 is the y-intercept of the quadratic equation x squared plus 7x plus 6 equals 0. Thank you so much for listening to my methods of solving quadratic equations.